Okay, before we dive into the mailbag, you know what I need you to do. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below, share with your friends, share with your enemies. Easy to do. But first, we're diving into the mailbag. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Easiest way to get your show or question answered here on the show, fire in those DMs. Just my name. Start with Paul, first-time DMer. I was curious to get your thoughts on the following. Let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that Antonio Pierce ends up not being the Raiders' coach next season. Who are some of the smart, progressive, and creative minds that you would interview if you were Mark Davis? I mean, specifically, young up-and-coming coaches like Mike McDaniels. Here's the problem. They've done that. They just kind of did that. You know, Josh McDaniels was supposed to be this kind of young, innovative guy who already had experience, ton of championship pedigree, and it backfired. Now, you could say there were definitely red flags, right? The Indianapolis situation. But I think the Denver situation, people gave him a pass in the sense that it was so long ago, he was so young, and they tried it. Like, are they going to go with Ben Johnson, the OC for the Detroit Lions? You know, I don't know if the Raiders are really in position to do that again. He's in Vegas, new arena. They haven't had much success. I think he'd be more likely to kind of go retready. You know, obviously the best retread of probably, and retread's even the wrong way. A guy that has been a long-time head coach, because Andy Reid wasn't a retread. He had just got fired. But like that version of a guy, and I think in recent memory, it's been guys that haven't had as much success. Ron Rivera in Washington. I would say Frank Reich right now in Indianapolis. He needs to get the train on the tracks. And he did that with Jack Del Rio years ago, and it worked. They were really, really shitty. Jack got there. I think they went 7-9 next year. If Derek hadn't broke his ankle, they would have won the division. So I think he's going to try to not outthink the room here. Jim Harbaugh makes a ton of sense. Right? If Jim would come, if you could afford him, to me, that's a no-brainer. I think Coward said this. A lot of people, he guarantees you to win. He's 4 for 4. There's no chance you lose. Now, I'm not saying you win the Super Bowl, but that ain't the Raiders' bar. You just go back-to-back playoff appearances, back-to-back 10-win seasons. That'd be incredible. That's as good as it gets in Raiderland. So I think Mark either attempts to do that, which I'm sure he's probably sniffing around right now, or he, you know, that's where I think Antonio Pierce is the safest. Player has been assistant coach now for a while. Players respect him. I also think that can give you a little breathing room, right? Let's just say they go 8-9 or 9-8. You can give Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly like 3-year deals. You know, Mark's handed out 10-year deal to Gruden, 6-year deal to Josh McDaniels. It's very expensive to get in that game when you don't have when you don't feel great about who you're going to hire. And I don't know if this cycle is great. Now, you could say that Doug Peterson is a guy last year that went to Jacksonville, like that type coach that has coached somewhere before, that you feel comfortable, that has had a little success, ideally, you know, Super Bowl success, but you just, I don't know. You just got to get someone that knows what they're doing, right? And Josh McDaniels didn't know what he was doing because he can't get along with anybody. Some of the stories you hear are like, what? This is crazy. But it's kind of who he is. For the mailbag, can you list all the teams you think need a quarterback in the first round in 2024 and break down why they need to not fuck it up? Well, I think some of them are extremely obvious, right? The Chicago Bears, they are 100% taking a quarterback. Fields hasn't been reliable, and he hasn't been good enough to keep. They're taking a quarterback. The New York Giants, taking a quarterback. I think the Green Bay Packers, taking a quarterback. The New England Patriots, taking a quarterback. Now, here's the thing. I'm recording this. Draymond Green just got suspended 5 games. Now, if you think what he did was a little egregious, okay, but 5 games. I mean, what are we fucking doing? I think Adam Silver easily is the worst commissioner of my lifetime. Like, to me, he runs circles around Manfred and Bud Selig in terms of incompetence. But the media, like, kind of vibes with his politics and really likes him, and he texts a lot of them. If Adam Silver would have taken over the NBA when David Stern did in the mid-'80s, I think the NBA would have gone bankrupt. I think it would have failed. It never would have became what it became. But I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, like, part of the NBA tanking is a big part of that culture, and it's been a huge part of the culture on Adam Silver's watch. That's why they've lost half their audience. In the NFL, it's just not part of the culture. It just is not. Coaches won't do it. Players won't stop trying. It's impossible to half-ass an NFL game. Maybe you can quit. When I say quit, like half-ass it in the fourth quarter of a big blowout. But you can't just walk into a game and not try. You'll get hurt. So you can't. New England stinks. The Giants stink. All these teams stink. But they can randomly win a game, right? They can win a game they shouldn't win because they're going to keep trying. So Belichick, Dayball, none of these guys are going to stop. LaFleur. It's just not wired in these guys. So I could say what they need to do to not fuck it up, not win games, because I'm also not a proponent of tanking in the NFL. But I do believe once you establish you're awful, like the Patriots, the Giants, you guys are awful. Awful. Right? I don't think the Packers are any good. You're not any good. Losing once you get past Thanksgiving, like, there's no point in winning. I'm never a proponent of, like, just tank the season. Tank to get Caleb or tank to get Lawrence. I mean, both those two guys, I think we both all agree, a little overrated. Suck for luck. That one nailed it, right? That was well worth it. But these other guys, remember, tank for Tua. So you can't play that game. The other thing that's different in basketball is, like, yeah, Victor Wembanyama stays healthy. He's going to be pretty good. Like, if Shaquille O'Neal's in the draft, like, yeah, it's worth getting the number one pick. Like, you kind of know. Like LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Some of them, they vary on their greatness. But you can't argue that guy's going to have a major impact. And quarterback, you never know. Like, God, I mean, Zach Wilson and Trey Lance went second and third in a draft. Neither guy can play dead in the Western. Think about that. Huge Chiefs fan. It's tough not to see the struggles of the offense. It's tough to see the struggles on the offensive side of the ball. Nick Wright says they are basically still the same team, but after 9-10 weeks, the offense is still struggling. Even more so in the second half of games. What do you think is causing the rift from last year when they arguably had a worse receiving core? Why, if I remember correctly, was it last year or 2 years ago that Mahomes went on the crazy turnover streak? I think it was last year, but might have been 2 years ago when Tyreek was still on the team. Like, last year, none of it matters. They won the freaking Super Bowl. And to me, the most important thing they have for them, like, okay, your offense is going to struggle some games, maybe all season. Who cares? You got a really good defense, and you got Patrick Mahomes. I like your chances. You're going to be favored against everybody in the NFL, especially if you have home field advantage in the AFC. You will be favored in every game, right? Obviously, big test Monday night against the Eagles. It'll be fascinating to watch. But your defense is legit. Like, part of having a great defense, you usually don't see, like, hey, 85 Bears had the second-rated offense in the league. That's usually not how it works. There's a little bit of a give and take. Travis getting a little older, deeply in love. And again, it's a little harder to be dominant on offense when you drafted some young wide receivers. I kind of like the Rice guy. I'd say Sky Moore hasn't blossomed into probably what they were hoping. Their probably second best skill guy beside Kelsey is a running back, and Coach Reed's a passing coach. So if Pacheco played for Kyle Shanahan, he might lead the league in rushing, but that's not really Andy's MO as a play caller. You guys are going to be fine. Like, would I put my life savings on you guys to win the Super Bowl? No. Is there a chance you lose in a playoff game? Of course there is. But if I'm you guys, do I like my chances? Let's not forget, a lot of the Patriot teams over the years, like the 2007 Patriots, did not win the Super Bowl. A lot of the teams that had some flaws, especially in the mid-teens and early on before obviously Brady became Brady, like, sometimes you win, it's not your sexiest squad. Right? The sexiest squad you guys had didn't win the Super Bowl. You could argue that first year when Mahomes won the MVP, and the year you guys lost to Tom Brady, obviously you lost the two offensive tackles, but it's funny when you get really high standards, right? We talk about this in baseball, like Yankees or Dodgers, winning 100 games is kind of irrelevant. It's like, do you win playoff series? That's why when the Yankees miss the playoffs, everyone's ready to burn the building down. When you're the Kansas City Chiefs, to me, they're the only team in the NFL that's Super Bowl or bust. They're the only team in the NFL that when the season ends and they don't win the Super Bowl, you literally say it was a disappointment, right? If the Eagles go to the Super Bowl again and lose, it's going to suck. And I say this all the time. Same thing with the Niners. Like, they were not Super Bowl or bust coming into the season. Last time I checked, none of the Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, none of these guys have won them. Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor, Sean McDermott, Josh Allen. It's fucking Andy and Mahomes are the new Belichick and Brady. Just like Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. There are two coaches in the country that is a national championship or bust in college football. Not Brian Kelly, not Harbaugh, definitely not Ryan Day, definitely not Lincoln Riley. It's Kirby and Nick Saban. It's a disappointment if you're not playing for the national championship and winning it. No one else can say that. Like, if you make the playoffs, if Dan Lanning makes the playoffs at Oregon, incredible accomplishment. Same thing with Washington, same thing with Texas, same thing with Florida State. Honestly, Michigan, Ohio State, now there's pressure on them to win a game. Definitely Harbaugh, probably more than Ryan Day. But I don't know, man. Only Tiger can be disappointed when he doesn't win a major in his prime. No one else really can. Something magical happens when the third quarter ends and the fourth quarter begins. The energy changes. The fourth quarter is where games are won, where champions are made. And in business, it's where sales teams become legends. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win in Q4 and close the year strong. Sales Hub prospecting workplaces organizes your schedule, goals, and to-do lists in one place to save your team precious fourth quarter time. Smart sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. And with an easy-to-use deal management tool, reps can find, track, and close deals all in one place. Plus, AI forecasting helps you accurately predict future success, which means less hoping for deals and more crushing targets. Put your sales team on the fast track to winning Q4 with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales. John, why you hate Ohio and Ohio State? I'm from Columbus, live near Michigan border. It kind of pisses me off when you shit on us and Ryan Day. I've always appreciated the Ohio State program, like a lot of the players. Whenever I see A.J. Hawk on TV with McAfee, like A.J. Hawk, like Dante Whitner, love Dante Whitner. Dustin Fox, my guy. I like watching C.J. Stroud. Like a lot of your players. I just hate Ryan Day. Can't stand him. I can't stand looking at him. I root against him as a coach. So I don't necessarily hate your program because historically your program has stood for what I've liked. Defense, tough running game, just beat the shit out of you. You guys have a high-level football program. You could argue over the last 30 years, the best program in the country, right? You would say over the last 10, obviously Alabama. Over the last 5, it's Georgia. But over the last 20, it's probably Ohio State. When you factor in draft picks, I mean, it's just a dominant program. But I just don't like your coach. I'm a Harbaugh guy, born on third base. I think Urban's a clown. Though, listen, I think Urban's one of the biggest D-bags ever. Big-time coach. Ryan Day, a big-time coach? I don't know. I think something about him I don't like. Sometimes you just don't like people. That's the other thing. This is sports. You don't have to like everybody. I fucking can't stand the Lakers. Don't like LeBron. Right? Who else do I not like? Don't really like Deshaun Watson. Let's find an NFL coach I don't like. Kind of indifferent on a lot of NFL coaches. You just don't like some people. What's wrong with that? I don't like Patrick Cantlay on the PGA Tour. Xander's starting to bother me. I mean, sometimes you just don't like people. It's part of life. And it's not like I think that much about it. I just know when I see Ryan Day on my television, I root against him. And most times it's not, but I'm also not an idiot. Like when you're on TV against 90% of your opponents, like I know you're going to win. So I don't stand there like rooting for you to lose because I know you're not going to lose. But when you play Michigan, I'm rooting for Michigan. I hope Michigan beats the shit out of you. Just a fact. With the Harbaugh situation, does NIL make NCAA sanctions obsolete? Who cares if they lose a few scholarships if they can pay players? I don't see why the NCAA isn't obsolete as we speak. What do they bring to the table? Why does college football need the NCAA? A little more complicated in college basketball because they run and own the NCAA tournament. But in college football, they don't run the conferences. They definitely don't run the playoffs. Obviously, they govern the conferences, but why do you allow them to? Right? How does that make any sense? It's not one of those things where I can complain about taxes all day long. It is what it is. I'm not going to be the lone guy that gets out of it. Right? Now, I can manipulate it. 1099 guy, have some good write-offs, make a little, it's part of life, but you're never going to get away out of it. I can't just leave, say, I'm going to live in Scottsdale, Arizona, but I don't have to follow any of the rules from the U.S. government. That's never going to happen. But if you're the Big Ten and the SEC, why don't you guys look at each other and just say, tell the NCAA to kiss our ass. We're not listening to anything you say. We don't care about you. So Mark Emmert, I don't even know if he still runs. Whoever runs it, in all of his moronic loser helpers, you can shoot us emails. You can pretend we give a shit about anything you say. We simply do not. And what control do you have over any of us? You don't have any. So adios. See you later. We don't need you to negotiate television contracts. We don't need you to play the games. And we definitely don't need you to run the playoffs. So get out of our way. See you later. That's what I would do. So I don't think, I don't know. I think the NCAA is in trouble in general. Do you think there ever was a college football team that would beat an NFL team of their same time period? We had this argument for a long period of time. Had it a lot in basketball when some of those tanking teams, and everyone's argument was always like, well, they're all pros. And I remember Sam Hinkie had a team of like, well, I don't know if a lot of these guys are pros. Now, the argument in the NFL, the shittiest team still is 53 guys are all professional athletes. And let's just pick some of the sweet teams in college football of my life. Because to me, it would have to be a complete team. That LSU team was incredible on offense. And I think they could definitely score on NFL teams with Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson. Who am I missing? Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Clyde, Randy Moss's kid. But I don't know defensively if they would be at the same level as some of those like peak Miami teams, maybe some of those peak Ohio State teams, some of the peak USC teams. Now, the difference, though, is like if I have one of those peak Miami teams like Ed Reed and all those guys, or one of those peak USC teams in the mid-2000s with Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush, or even the Mal Luga teams probably a little better on defense. Those guys get bigger and stronger as they get older. So when you're a really good player at 21 or 22 and you're going to be a pro, you're going to be a just stronger athlete at 25, 26. Now, I'd have to think about some of the awful teams. I remember a running joke when I was at college that USC could beat the 49ers. And this was after the 49ers run kind of ended. Mike Nolan became their head coach, and they were awful. I mean, they were competing. They did have the number one pick. They got Alex Smith. And Pete Carroll refused to leave USC to take the job. So I would have the take of, depending on who the coach was, I'd have to really look at the roster. I think there'd be a chance. Basketball, 100% it could happen. If you get the right college team against some of these teams over the years that literally were rolling out like random average G leaguers, like no pros, 100%. Football, a little more difficult, but I think it'd have to be the perfect team, probably one of those Miami teams where literally every guy's a first or second rounder, or some of those Pete Carroll USC teams where it's like their defense is elite and they'd have to play an awful NFL team. But if you think about it this year, like let's pick an awful NFL team, the Bears or the Carolina Panthers. Like they're not getting beat by a college team. You got to be worse than them. Or the Giants, right? Now, the Giants with Tommy DeVito, Tommy DeVito, it's not like he was lighting anyone up in college, right? But if you give the Giants Tyrod Taylor or Daniel Jones, they're beating the best college team. Like 2 years ago, that Georgia team. Basically, every guy in that Georgia defense, I think 14 out of the more than 11 of their starters got drafted on defense over a 2-year period, right? I think 14 guys. And all starters, and the majority of them got drafted in the top couple rounds. So could that team go toe-to-toe with like that defense of 2 years ago when it had everybody? like last year, obviously they had Jalen, but 2 years ago with the Jalen and the Deans and Quay Walker and the dude Balky took with the number 1 pick. What I'm forgetting his name. Is his name Walker? No, Walker's that's on the Packers. What's the dude's name on the Jags? But like that whole group, could they give this version of the Indianapolis Colts and Bryce Young and Frank a run for their money, just offense versus defense? 100%. If you don't think that, you're a fucking moron. Like all those guys went to the pros, immediately start. I mean, Jalen Carter's like an impact player. All the other guys, starters. I mean, what's his name? The middle linebacker, Dean, for the Eagles, injured now, like second year starts for the Eagles. Team that was just in the Super Bowl. I mean, these guys, it's not just we're starting on nobody teams. That's the other thing. Like, who do you start for? Do you start on the shittiest team in the league, or do you start for like playoff teams? You start looking around like, they're starting a lot of playoff teams. Hell, the Eagles have like 4 of them. Eagles have literally like 4 of them. Packers have a couple of them. So I think matchups, but overall win a game, I'd have to really dive into it. That's a good question. I hate the argument from like media nerd. Like, no way, it's not possible. It's not possible. Shut the fuck up. Do you think Trevor Lawrence will succeed in the NFL and win a playoff game for the Jags? Longtime Jags fan, really need something. I'm losing hope for the Super Bowl. Also, what do you believe is wrong? Do you believe it's Press Taylor, the OC, the O-line, Trevor's poor decision-making? I think on Sunday, when you guys played the Niners, I think the Niners were beating every team in the league. They were coming off 3 losses. They're coming off a bye. Everyone is laughing at them. They're about to fire their defensive coordinator. They add Chase Young. That team showed up to annihilate somebody because they were embarrassing for 2 straight weeks on defense. Cousins, who still leads the NFC in touchdowns, he's got 18, but he looked like Peyton Manning. And then what Joe Burrow did to them, I think it was just a perfect storm. Now, your offense to me had looked pretty good before that in most games besides Kansas City, but your offensive line got beat like a drum. They could not block any of those guys. Now, here's the other thing. When you get hit as a quarterback, I don't care if you're Tom Brady or if you're Baker Mayfield, it's going to rattle you. I feel like Trevor Lawrence really gets rattled. But you hit Patrick and some of the other top quarterbacks, Lamar. Listen, you might cause a turnover or whatever, but they've come right back. Trevor, that once they really start hitting him, definitely down the early in the second half, is like, what is going on here? This doesn't look like some elite player. And it's why everyone was kind of shitting on him. So you have to get better when you're not playing your best game and things aren't going right. So right, to be a good golfer, what makes guys on the PGA Tour is not that they can shoot 65. It's when they're spraying it all over the place, they can still shoot 73 or 72. Right? Like, it's what makes a great pitcher. When you don't know where the ball's going, I can still give you five innings. I can still give up just 2 runs and get us to the bullpen. Right? It's not when I'm humming and I'm a pro athlete, whether you're a tennis player, whether you're a golfer, whether you're a football player. Like, especially if you're a talented one, you're going to look good. What happens when it's not going well? It's why most of us that aren't athletes professionally, you got to handle that business-wise, right? When shit's hitting the fan, can you keep your head up? Can you plow through it? Can you figure out a way to get to the other side of the river? Or do you sink? Do you just wave the white flag? And I think that separates a lot of people, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's life. It's because it's easy to kind of tap out or just go into the tank. And I think that's one thing Trevor Lawrence clearly has to improve on. A lot of talk about the Steelers hanging on for dear life, being super lucky and just not good. But what if this is just who they are? The roster on defense is constructed with guys who make big splash plays, and we lead the league in turnovers. We have a two-headed monster. Two-headed monster sounds like. I'm not the biggest Najee Harris guy. I think Warren's a lot better. But is it possible that this team isn't lucky or no good, but actually performing exactly how it was designed? I saw my guy Cam Hayward, who our producer here, James, works with at Omaha, and he's obviously come on the show. And I see a lot of his clips on my social media feed, and he kind of went on this little rant. And he was kind of pissed off. He's like, everyone keeps saying we're overrated, we win ugly. He's like, what the fuck is the whole point of this sport? It's not to put up 40 points. It's not to run for 800 yards, not to have 7 sacks. It's literally you play a game, do you win or do you lose? in pro football. College football is a little bit because of rankings and, the playoffs only get 4 teams. It's about how you look. It does not matter. So if the Steelers this week play DTR and win the game against the Browns, let's say they win the game 17-15. It's like, God, they barely got by the Browns with their backup rookie quarterback. You know what doesn't matter? How it looked. Because they'd be 7-3. They'd be like, well, we're going to the playoffs. Now, where I do think it comes into play, like, are you going to win a playoff game that way? And maybe they will. Like you said, maybe this is just not just who they are, but they're comfortable winning those games. One thing I know about, I'll give you an example, the 49ers. The 49ers, if they're going to win by like 20, 30 points. But they've been in 3 tough games this year, and they've lost them all. It was ugly. You just got to find a way. Just win by a field goal, win by 1 point. Just figure it out. Just dig yourself out of the hole. And they can't do it. The Steelers are comfortable in that environment. And I think in football, in the NFL, in college football, in Power 5, in the playoffs, in your big games, you got to be comfortable in that environment, right? And ideally, would you rather win by 10 than 2? Of course. But they're very comfortable doing that. And Cam's whole thing was, who cares? Why does it matter? It would matter if we were 3-6 and we were losing ugly. Like, God, you could have won all these games, but they fucking won the games. And that's what I talked about earlier in the week. It's like the greatness of Mike Tomlin. It's the whole point. That's why he never has a losing record, because he never loses those spots. As a devoted Seahawks fan, I must say that I like the strategies we've have implemented the last couple years during the draft. However, I am curious to hear your opinion regarding the quarterback position. It is quite evident that Geno is not the solution. I agree. If you were John Schneider's position, with what seems like a young, talented team, what course of action would you recommend? I would say this. I think you're heavily evaluating all the college quarterbacks. Clearly, like Drake May and Caleb aren't going to be available. But the next 3 to 8 guys. So would we be willing to trade up? Would we be willing to take one of these guys in the second round that we view as a starter while we have Geno on the team, so there's not super amount of pressure of him to start right away? Then I think you canvass the land of who else is available, right? Would we trade a first-round pick for Kyler Murray? Probably wouldn't do that after going through it with Russ. Kirk Cousins is going to be available. Probably doesn't make much sense off an Achilles. Like, it's really the draft or nothing. And I think that they, probably like they did last year, just like they will do again this year, I think they will evaluate those guys very, very thoroughly. And I almost expect them to draft a guy. I really do.